Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, it's been a whole 9 days and Tottenham Hotspur have not signed their fourth player yet. These are difficult times for everyone involved. I am, of course, joking slightly, but I understand there's a little bit of eagerness, let's put it that way, on social media about that fourth player coming in. Whole 9 days since Bissouma walked through the door. Feels like a lifetime. We've kind of got used to Spurs being quite active early in this window. So I think social media, especially Twitter, I feel like it's slightly run away with itself. It's an interesting place right now. And I think if I ever need to ground myself and give me any context whatsoever, I have to just look back about 12 months. That the utter disaster and farce and shambles that was Tottenham Hotspur and their lack of direction. They didn't know what they were doing last summer. I was reporting on managers in talks breaking down, Harry Kane wanting to leave the club, no transfers, of course, because there was no manager in place. And then obviously Nuno came in for his 4 months of heaven that he brought. That's slightly patronising. There were some good times. We'll always have Manchester City at home on the opening day of the season, Nuno, and the press conferences where you kind of told me off like a father/teacher. But yeah, I do just have to give myself the context of that because this is light years away and it's actually kind of really fascinating in a good way what's happening at Tottenham right now. Obviously, Antonio Conte, Champions League football, a real belief around the club, all the top players wanting to stay. 3 players signed already, including one of the best central midfielders outside the top 6, as in the traditional top 6. There seems to be a plan at Tottenham as well, which hasn't always seemed to be the case. So yeah, I do find it quite funny that people are still getting quite angry on Twitter. It's been quite a helpful way of working out who to mute on Twitter. That's always the mute button is fantastic. It's fantastic because a lot of people get very angry and sometimes slightly aggressive, and you just think it's football. It's football. It's very important to all of us, but ultimately, it is football. And I just find it quite amusing. So yes, obviously, it's a different pace. Maybe that's what's kind of confusing people. Perhaps is that maybe we're so used to being negative, I guess, about the way that Tottenham do things. They have driven us to pessimism. I understand that wholeheartedly. I know that probably more so than anyone else because, try writing about that club. So yeah, I absolutely get that. And I think there's an element of excitement to it. I think that's why everyone's so built up about everything. There's an element of wanting Conte to be satisfied. I guess a fear of him walking away if he's not. I understand that. Like I say, gripes with the way the club was run in previous transfer windows. Get that, 100%. And I think there's probably also an element of the massively exaggerated state of mind that exists on social media, where everything is the worst thing in the world or the greatest thing in the world. And that's just kind of how it works. But, if you just want to look at it, at this exact moment in time I'm recording this video, okay, just put it into context. At this exact moment of time, of Spurs rivals in the Premier League, Manchester United and Chelsea have not signed a single player. Manchester City have completed at the moment just the one, Erling Haaland. Arsenal been linked with stars aplenty, and there's plenty of talk about who they might sign and or not sign. But in reality, they've signed just the 2 players. Liverpool, like Spurs, have signed 3 players, but 2 of those technically are young teenage prospects. They could be very, very good players, but they fall into that cheaper teenage category, I guess. Spurs have signed 3 players. Yeah, of course, you could argue that Bissouma is probably 30 million plus all in if he triggers every possible kind of thing that's going on there. And then the other 2 are free agents, of course. But let's be honest, Ivan Perisic is a fantastic free agent. The word free agent is kind of thrown about as if it's a derogatory thing. If you talk about finances, there's a signing on fee, which is not inconsiderate. There's the wages, of course, and everything like that, loyalty bonuses, things like that. But he's a very good player. It's almost, I don't know, that's almost being dismissed now, that transfer. Maybe that's because we're so excited about the new one, the next one, and things like that. It's a funny one, and I think I've got to admit we the media are to blame as well. We stoke things up. The sheer volume of stories that are produced during a transfer window is incredible, and obviously not just UK, across the world. There's and anything can make a story. So a journalist can speak to a particular source, and that source may exaggerate something. So let's say, and this is just purely an example, let's say an agent has had a conversation with a sporting director or someone at a club, and the agent has mentioned a player, and the sporting director goes, "Oh yeah, they're good," something like that. That then can get turned into a story saying, "Club X are interested in that player," kind of thing, when technically it was just someone that came up in conversation and may even been brought up by the agent. But then obviously it would help that agent and that player to then put that out into the media, because then that player either gets firmed up with interest from other clubs who maybe were stalling or weren't coming in, or even the flip side, they might get a new contract from their club. So it's, it all works. It's this funny little bubble that exists within football journalism. Because I was thinking about this. We'll talk about Gareth Bale and his MLS move a little bit later. But what I quite like, I guess, about the way that the American media, especially in NFL, works, they don't really report stuff until it's done. That's it. It's like, bang, talks are happening, it's happening. Whereas, obviously, and I'm no different, we write more, like I will write stories about players that I know Spurs are seriously looking at, players that Spurs are considering a move for, and things like that. And it's interesting in one way to know where the club are looking, what type of profile, what type of players. But on the flip side, if I'm going to look at it in a negative fashion, of course, it puts all these things out. And that's when you get, and especially this summer feels like even more so than normal, Club X has missed out on this player, gutted, we got him, and all this sort of stuff. Whereas in reality, pretty much 99% of the times that's said, that club never moved for that player. I mean, Gabriel Jesus is a good example. Spurs, I've said before, Spurs have an interest in Gabriel Jesus. He's a player that they've looked at as a potential striker, but they didn't make a bid for him as far as I'm aware. And I think, we'll talk about Gabriel Jesus a little bit later. We'll talk about a few other players that, in terms of Spurs and Arsenal and various targets they're looking at, and who fits who and why certain things. But yeah, that's what you get. So you get people getting very agitated. Let's put it this way. If someone sees something on the internet they want to believe, they will believe it. If they see something they don't want to believe on the internet, they don't. And that's just the way it works. And it can be a source that's a little bit dodgy, that maybe is saying something they want to happen will happen, and they will believe that. And it might be a fairly reputable source that says it isn't, and there will be a million reasons why they don't want to believe that. And I understand that. We've all been there. It's a fan thing. But then, of course, that then leads to this whole missed out. And that, I guess, on the flip side, when it comes to the clubs, they have this whole, fans get angry. You missed out on this player. You didn't sign him. You let him go to our rivals. And it's been like, the club probably, if they were to sit down and have an honest discussion with any of these fans, they would say, we were never going for them anyway. That's not a player that we had in our plan to actually go for in this window. It'd be really fascinating. And just the whole way. I'd love, he's never ever going to do it because he's just not that kind of character. But I would love Daniel Levy to sit down and just, maybe with a group of fans, a bit like the old days, he used to do the odd fan forum, things like that, just sit down and explain maybe certain decisions and the way transfers are done, certain things like that. And I think it'd be fascinating. I mean, we, the media, like I said before, I think I've said hello to him once. We shook my hand at a stadium event. And I've been in 2 press conferences that he's been involved in. And that's in my 6 years of covering the club. And that's it. That's it. I know he's done a couple of interviews, maybe in that time. That's about it. And I just feel that would be a real eye-opener and a fascinating thing. And of course, Paratici style doesn't help either. This whole, said it a million times, 10 players for every position, the whole spider web of potential deals. I think that in the media just creates this huge thing as well about players that, Spurs maybe haven't actually moved for, they've just inquired about. And yeah, it's been interesting. It's been very interesting trying to navigate that. When I said that Spurs, seem to have called their interest in Christian Eriksen. People almost say liar. It's like they really do want to believe it. It's quite funny. I don't take it personally. Like I said, if anyone's really unpleasant, they get blocked, and if they're just mildly unpleasant, they get muted. So I'm not fussed. It's my notifications are always a complete and utter mess anyway, so I probably don't see 99% of stuff that goes on anyway. But yeah, look, the key to it is, when it comes to transfers, we know that Conte wants as many faces in as possible before the team fly out to Korea on July the 9th for the tour. We know that. But we also know, if we're being realistic, that not all transfers are as simple as bang, bang, get it done kind of thing. It's not like it would seem on paper. It's not like it would seem in FIFA or Football Manager or any games. FIFA's not even going to be called FIFA anymore, is it? It's not as easy as that. And there's many moving parts to them. And sometimes it's players going out. Sometimes it's financial stuff with the other clubs. Sometimes it's agents. There's so many different sides to things. And let's be honest. Yes, of course, Conte. In an ideal world, Conte wants as many in for that flight as possible. And I think maybe another one or two will be in before that. I do. I think it'll be 4 or 5 new signings, which, let's be honest, is incredible if that would be the case for Tottenham. There's been, I think, was it his last pre-season tour I went on was Singapore, Shanghai. I think there was Tongi. I think that was it. I think he was the one player that got in time to go, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was. So, look, let's be honest. If at the coming to after pre-season or in August, if there are 1 or 2 big signings that have to be done there, they're the only time they can get done because certain doors open or whatever. Do you think Conte will say, no, lads, that's fine. I wanted it done before pre-season. I don't know why he's speaking like a posh country gent. And I'm not going to do an Italian accent. So of course he is. Of course he's going to say, yeah, I don't know. Let's say this is an example. This is not me saying this is going to happen. But let's say suddenly at the end of the window, Bastoni became available. Conte is not going to go, no. I wanted him at the start of the window. Not now. Of course he's going to go, brilliant. And then you just have to work around it. So, yeah, I think we all get very, very overexcited about transfers. And I include myself in this, absolutely. But it's about context. Of course it is. It's about context and getting everything done. And honestly, this is not meant to be patronising in any way, because I do understand it. And I understand the history behind why people get quite frustrated as well. I get that. There's a lot of strange decisions have been made at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club in recent years. So I understand that. So let's talk cash. Let's talk cash. Not me giving you any or you giving me any. Let's talk £100 million. Because that is what I've found out is quite freely available information on Company's House. You can see that Tottenham filed the information that they have drawn down £100 million of that £150 million cash injection that ENIC put into the club. That was last month, wasn't it? So that has now, 100 million of that has been taken across in terms of cash capital, I guess you call it, for I want to get the exact. So last month, if you completely missed it, the club agreed a capital increase of up to £150 million from majority shareholder ENIC through the issue of convertible A shares and accompanying warrants. The investment could be drawn in portions until the end of the year, and the bulk, I was reading off a bit, but I know the bulk of that £150 million is going to be put towards transfers. That's what it is. That's what I've been told by multiple people connected with the club or inside the club or whatever you want to hear. That's what everyone is saying. And any funds from sales on top of that. So what they've now done, we now know that they've taken £100 million out of that 150 to increase their capital, as they're obviously looking to make the moves. Now, the interesting thing that I haven't yet got exact confirmation on when. I think, let's see. So, Companies House, the motion got filed on Friday. However, if you look at the documentation, it does say that the date the shares were allotted was on May the 27th. So I've got to find out exactly. I've put out various feelers to ask about that. So whether that comes while I'm doing this video, I will let you know. If it doesn't, then I will obviously let you know otherwise. So whether that 100 million switched across on May 27th or has done so in the time since, I think the announcement was the 24th, I think, maybe a few days before that 27th date. So yeah, because obviously that's quite interesting, whether the money has been in there since May the 27th or whether it has been only there in recent days. Obviously, it does kind of make a difference, I guess. Although, Spurs would have had funds to work with anyway. And it's quite interesting. The two things that came out of this is some people were really excited about the fact that, okay, they've taken £100 million of that to put towards the transfer window. Fantastic. And there were certain people going, but it was 150 million. And it's like, I must stress, they are going to use the rest of the 50 million. They've just taken 100 million across first. I guess the idea is you don't have to kind of bring it all across in one go. I've also seen people saying, but £100 million isn't enough in today's world of transfers. And I get that. I absolutely understand the logic behind that statement, 100%. But what I would say is you've also got to understand that most transfers, very few, all of that money is going in up front. That's such a rare thing, an upfront deal. Most of these ones you'll see, they're instalments over 3, 4, 5 years. So that 100 million, I don't know, just say Spurs was to sign an £80 million player out of that. The likelihood of £80 million going out for that player is very, very low. It will be an upfront fee of something, and then the rest will be in instalments over 5 years. So, yeah, so I understand the 100 million aspect doesn't sound that much, but if you're looking at it, that is to be able to work with working capital and cash now, and in terms of the upfront money going towards things, it's different. Even like the Basuma money, I'd be intrigued to know the breakdown of that. Like I say, over 30 million, I think, with add-ons, but I do wonder up front how much money has actually gone to Brighton. I would guess, purely a guess, it's a fraction of that. Maybe half or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that's what I mean, 100 million. And there will have been other money. I don't think, because people are looking at it quite plainly as, has Basuma coming out? Will the Romero money come out of this 100 million? It's kind of, that's indicating that Spurs were starting with zero. I don't think Spurs were starting with zero. So yeah, there's kind of much more to it. The other thing that people are saying is, but are they actually going to spend all 150 million, or is this some kind of big PR stunt? Quite interestingly, and I understand the pessimism because of transfer window messes of the past, and I understand that. But in a weird way, it's actually in ENIC's best interest for the club to spend this money. And that sounds weird, but it's true because of the ownership thing. So I'm going to read out a little bit of the statement in case, because I think maybe some people maybe have forgotten this or didn't listen, but didn't notice it when it was said at the time. So this was what was said in the statement about the £150 million capital increase. If drawn in full and based on assumptions regarding the above, ENIC's ownership of the club could see an increase from its current level of 85.6% to circa 87.5% on conversion. Any dilutive impact is dependent on the number of shares granted and will be shared by all shareholders proportionately and principally by ENIC, the major shareholder. So yeah, in essence, if Spurs use or take across that £150 million for use, ENIC get more of the club under their control. And the reason, obviously, that is a big thing is if they would choose to sell it, because they would own more of it and thus would be able to get more out of any potential deal. The club will always deny that, oh no, there's no intention to sell. That's pretty much what they always say. I hear little noises. I hear talk that potentially they could choose to sell within the next year, because from a financial point of view, it's probably going to be peak value time for Tottenham Hotspur as a club. I mean, if you look at it, you've got Champions League football back, the stadium being an absolute monster revenue maker that they kind of wanted it to be. It's now in its element. It's got full crowds every other week. It's got the NFL. It's got the massive concerts, the Gagas, the Guns N' Roses, and all that playing. It's got world title heavyweight fight bouts being held there and everything. And obviously, there's all the surrounding changes that are going to happen to the area around Tottenham as well. So yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Is if there were a time that they might choose to sell, potentially that would be in this next 12-month period or so, because it will hit peak value time. So being able to have an extra, what we're looking at, just under 2% of the club under your ownership, suddenly that would be a good time to do that. So the reason I'm saying all that is because when people are saying, well, why would you spend £150 million? They're never going to do that. It actually benefits them to do it. It's a weird little circle. So yeah. So there you go. So that's the financial side of things. But in essence, it's good news because it means Spurs have money to play with. How many summers and how many transfer windows have you heard me say Spurs have to sell to buy and all that sort of stuff? Because that's the way they've been operating. Whereas now they've got this delightful cushion of being, and that was why we've already seen 3 transfers happen. So yeah, it's a different Tottenham this summer. It's a different beast, and that's why. Yeah, I think it's not the time to get all down in the dumps because the 4th signing hasn't come in 9 days after the next, after the last. And what I should also say though, just because that money's there, also doesn't mean they have to pay silly money over the odds for players, and we'll come to that with certain players coming up, because yeah, you still don't get kind of held to ransom over certain players. That's just not how football works. So yeah, I just find all that fascinating. I do. I find it really interesting. The very different Tottenham in the market, and obviously they have a different person at the helm, I guess, in terms of transfer, and that is Fabio Paratici. Obviously, we got a little taste of him last time, but he came in late. It was a different way of him dealing. Whereas this one, he's had essentially this whole year to plan for this window, which is why I think we saw the early deals done. He's turns 50 next month. Big birthday for Fabio Paratici, and he has been a busy man. From what I understand, he spends 3 days in the middle of the week working at Hotspur Way, and then the other 4 days he heads off back to Italy, where he goes to his Turin base that he works over there. I understand that on, I think it was Thursday, he was at what was just a standard all-day board meeting at Tottenham on the Thursday. Left that halfway through the day, jetted off to Milan and started speaking to various clubs over there about various situations and things like that. Italian clubs, I should say, not just clubs from Milan. But yeah, I just find that fascinating, that way of life. Actually, talking about far-flung places, I should say thank you very much for everyone with the Kefalonia video that did. Lots of really nice responses. That was very kind of you. I enjoy doing those. It's good fun. And I've seen a lot of people in the comments saying, oh, I'm going to go there, I'm going to go there. So that's kind of the point with them, is to show people a part of the world they might not have been to. And if they want to go on holiday, cracking, I've helped out, I guess. So yeah, just want to say thank you for that. It was very kind. A lot of comments are all very nice. I don't think that anyone said you're a muppet or anything like that. So yeah, let's talk about transfers. I think the key place to start, obviously, is with the Brazilian duo that are dominating headlines in North London right now, and that is Richarlison and Raphinha. Yeah, it's an interesting one because it very much seems an either-or. It seems a who-fits-who scenario as well. I have a personal opinion on this, which I'm going to share in a minute. I mean, in terms of them, look, Richarlison, we know Paratici really likes Richarlison. He reportedly wants to leave Everton. And, the fact that Everton have financial fair play issues, which we're going to talk about as well, and the fact that, Richarlison's represented now by CAA Base, an agency with very, very close links to Spurs, and he's only got 2 years left on his contract now, and he's a Premier League ready-made player. I can totally understand that. He had a good season. I mean, in an Everton team that were really struggling, 10 goals and 5 assists from 30 Premier League matches. And obviously, he's very versatile. We know this. He can play pretty much anywhere across the front three. So that's Richarlison. The alternative, another player that Spurs like, of course, is Raphinha. Now, he scored more goals, 11 goals for Leeds and 3 assists. It's been quite widely put out there that he'd prefer to move to Barcelona, but Barcelona, unlike you say, to kind of, I think we're looking at similar-ish price tags for both of these players, both plus, 50 million plus players. Some talk that potentially Raphinha could be 60, maybe even 65. But obviously Barcelona at the moment are not going to be able to pay anything like that until they get some people out the door. I think Arsenal had an earlier bid rejected, and obviously lots of talk about them. I think he's also got 2 years left on his deal. So, I said I was going to give my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is that I prefer probably Raphinha as a player. I think they're both exciting attacking players, but I just feel like Raphinha, he's just got a bit of magic about him. He's a player that I really, really love watching. However, I actually think Richarlison is the better fit for Tottenham. And there's some noises that that's Tottenham's thinking as well, or some people certainly within Tottenham. And I think the idea behind that is that, let's put it this way, the easiest way to put this, I spoke about the versatility. So, Richarlison mainly kind of plays on the left when he plays. I was looking at his Everton stuff last year, and he was either on the left or as a lone striker up front, especially filling in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin when he was out injured. So that's kind of the position that Spurs are looking for, because they're expecting to lose Steven Bergwijn, him going off to Ajax probably. So they are looking, Conte, as always, wants 2 players in every position. So Richarlison would fit that role on the left, with Sonny, 2 of them. On the right, you'd have Kulusevski and Lucas, and then you'd have Harry Kane. But what Richarlison also does is we know he can play up front. So that, in a financial point of view, saves Spurs money on having to sign a striker. Unless there was an incredible deal. But in essence, if they chose to, they could just say, well, do you know what? Let's get Richarlison in. Let's use him for the left and up front. He can be the backup for Harry when he needs a rest up front. He can be the backup for Sonny. We can push all of them. We don't want to use backup. We shouldn't use backup in this new brave Spurs world. Everyone is a squad player, all pushing to play. So in terms of that, it makes sense. And I guess you could also say, because some people might say, well, that's not 2 players for every position. You could argue that obviously Perisic can also play on the left as well, which means that, you could say that he could be the backup for Sonny there. I don't want to use the word backup. And Richarlison is Harry Kane's backup. I used it again and really need to get out of the habit of that. But you know what I mean. I think logically Richarlison makes the most sense, even though I prefer Raphinha as a player. But they both would bring something to Tottenham. They would. So with Raphinha, I'm probably killing the pronunciation of his name. Apologies to anyone connected with Raphinha. Raphinha. I don't think there's another I, is there? Raphinha. Oh, just me badly pronouncing names for a change. But with him, he is mainly a player who plays on the right. That is mainly his role. He can play on the left at a push. He can even play as a support striker, but he is mostly a player on the right. And that's where he doesn't quite fit what Spurs are requiring, because then you would probably have to move Lucas to the left. Some talk of potentially Lucas maybe going, which I don't think he's too keen to do. It would have to be an incredible offer, but I don't think Lucas is really looking to leave Spurs at all. I think, I get the impression of some of the interviews I've seen with him out in Brazil, maybe looking to just see out his contract and then maybe head back to Brazil. So Lucas would have to play on the left, which is okay. It's not where Conte really saw him. He saw him more as the right and Bergwijn on the left. But the key thing with Raphinha is if you signed him, you would need to sign a striker. You would. So Spurs with Richarlison looked at it and thought, well, we could actually put that money elsewhere. We wouldn't actually then need to get a striker because we're kind of solving our problem because he can play up there. And, he scored goals as a striker for Everton last season as well. And they are both ready-made Premier League players. So, yeah, that I think logically makes sense. Look, if Spurs were able to get a breakthrough and see off the competition of Arsenal, I think Chelsea also looking at Raphinha and they signed him. I'm turning that down. He's a terrific player and I would absolutely be thrilled to watch him play. But I would understand the logic of them pushing more for Richarlison. That's my thinking about it. So the other thing that comes into play with all of this as well is, if you're not aware, June 30th is the date when technically the transfer year ends when it comes to financial fair play. So teams like Spurs have got no issues with financial fair play. They are well in the good side. Everton, of course, are not. Everton having some issues. They're well known, their issues. So yeah, I do wonder whether there's something that has to be done there, whether they need to get outgoings done by June 30th, although that's a push now, or whether they just don't do any activity. Maybe, I don't know whether they can just scrape through or not at this moment in time, and then after June 30th things can start to work. But I'm told that June 30th, especially abroad, is a big thing. Clubs really, really kind of look to that, and it's almost like a deadline day for them to try and get stuff done. So maybe keep an eye on things happening in the next, date 26. So maybe in the next 4 days, just see whether some things accelerate with certain clubs, and that is because of that June 30th thing. Sorry, I was going to talk about Spurs and Arsenal and this weird kind of rivalry. Like, the fans have really been on each other this summer. I'd say more so than normal about transfer things, and because it was all like Spurs fans saying Arsenal wanted Basuma, and Arsenal fans saying Spurs wanted Jesus and Raphinha and all this, and a lot of the time, as obviously, like I said before, they're going off reports that maybe weren't the full info, or they were part information, things like that. So my thing, the way I try and look at it, and I was having a chat. I have a friend I talked to called James, who is an Arsenal fan. I think I've said this before. Very nice chap. Gooner James, we'll call him. He is a very reasonable and logical football fan who kind of looks at things not just with the tribalism, I guess. We all look at football sometimes with. He's quite good at separating himself from that. And we were having a good discussion about this earlier, and both kind of agreed who Arsenal sign of these kind of names that have been linked, and who Tottenham sign of the names that they've been linked with, will be the right players for their club. I don't think it's a case of, we beat you to him. I don't think that's what this is. So Gabriel Jesus is the perfect example. Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal is a good player, and he will fit exactly what Arsenal need, I think. He's the kind of striker they will play with. He fills a gap in their first team, and he will start pretty much every single match for them, and that's what he wants. Tottenham, if they had pursued that deal, different thing altogether. He would not be a regular first team starter. He wouldn't. And that's not to pour scorn upon the transfer or anything like that. It's just saying Spurs have Harry Kane and Sonny, and I'd say even Kulusevski, because Kulusevski made such a huge impact in the Premier League in that second half of the season. I don't think Jesus actually gets in on the starting day of the season over any of those three because of what they did. And that's not to say that he's a worse player or anything like that, but I'm just saying in terms of that, if I'm him, I just see a place I can go to where I play every week. And that's what I mean by different players for different teams. And I think for him, Arsenal makes sense. It doesn't matter that Spurs have the Champions League football and definitely seem to be building big things. They're a team on the up. Arsenal will hope to be a team on the up as well, but there he will get regular football. And then you've got Raphinha. Raphinha is quite an interesting one as well, because technically at Arsenal they have Saka on the right as well. So he's going to have to kind of, one of them, it may be that they just need more competition there. But you'd think if you're going to sign a player who is potentially 60 million or more, especially without Champions League football as well and all the other stuff that brings, because that is what Spurs, I guess, can offer, is that, you're going to be playing Champions League football. So you are going to get more, there are more games to be handed out because obviously not everyone can play Premier League and Champions League. Whereas at Arsenal, you're probably going to have a more first choice 11. And with Saka and Raphinha in the similar position, it's an interesting one. But I think the key of what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to kind of get away from this mentality of we've beaten you to play at A, B or C. And I think it is more, clubs will move for the right player that fits what they want, whether it's the system, the tactics, the manager, the club, everything. So if Spurs do decide to go for Richarlison over Raphinha, it may be that they felt that they couldn't convince Raphinha because Arsenal were going to play him every week. It may be that. But it also may be because, like I said, Richarlison actually ticks more boxes for Tottenham. Who knows? We'll see. There's a real Brazilian theme to it. I know, obviously, Spurs have looked at Lucas Paqueta as well, the Lyon midfielder. Ajax star Anthony isn't there as well. He's another Brazilian that people have been looking at. I don't think, from what I understand, Spurs are looking to rival. Probably be United that go for him. Although I think there were some suggestions today they might stick around at Ajax. But yeah, there's definitely a Brazilian theme. I think the key to it is that a lot of these names, apart from those last two, are Premier League ready players, and that's why Spurs have looked at Alisson Maximin as well, and Adama Traore, my mate, as well. And they've also looked at British homegrown ones. I've said before about Brennan Johnson. They've looked at him. I think he'll want to stay at Forest this season. James Maddison. Again, he's talking like he wants to stay at Leicester. He had a brilliant season, James Maddison did. Another CAA-based client as well. But yeah, so yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with that kind of. I think we'll know within the next 3 to 4 days which player Arsenal are very clearly going for and which player that Spurs are going for. And my gut tells me it probably won't end up being the same player. I think they'll end up going for certain ones each. Or they have to, they can't share. But yeah. So yeah, we'll see. There's nothing kind of more on that yet because I don't think Spurs have advanced really their interest. I think they're still, as in Richarlison. I don't think any bids have gone in yet for him. I think that's always going to be one where they're just waiting for the moment on that. I think a lot of any Everton talks at the moment are over Harry Winks, and yeah, we'll talk about him in a little bit. We'll talk about some outgoings, and we'll discuss him as well. It's interesting. I saw when we were talking about going back to centre backs, I saw Josko Gvardiol's name coming up yesterday again. If you remember, way back during the Bastoni excitement times, kind of half excitement. I think we knew it was going to be a struggle to get him away anyway. But I actually said in the videos back then that I'd heard that Gvardiol was actually above Bastoni on the list, on the wish list for that left-sided centre-back position over Bastoni. Very much was Bastoni and Gvardiol at the top, and then lots of other players kind of below that, like the Torreses, Gay, Longley. The names have gone all out of my head. Very previous videos you'd have heard me say. That's going to really annoy me. And of course, Bremer. Bremer's a bit different. Bremer's not the left-sided one. He's either right-sided or in the centre. But which I think Longley can play as well. But Gvardiol is class. He is absolutely class. 20 years old, if you haven't heard of him. RB Leipzig centre-back. He is a Croatia international, and he is expected to be a star. Ukrainian lad, that's the other one I was going to say, whose name's just completely escaped me. 19-year-old lad, who I've said so many times before. There are so many names going on in my head that I forget about these things. But yeah, Gvardiol. Look, it's one of these where if Spurs were to make a statement signing, this would be it. Gvardiol, I have to keep calling. He is one of the best young players in the world, I'd say. He is Zabani.
Sorry, you might have heard me typing away there. I was desperate to know that I'd brought my laptop over there just in case of a moment like that. Zabani, he was a Ukrainian lad. But yeah, Gvardiol, he is, you're talking a potential Van Dijk type, as in a real star. Chelsea, City, looking at him, he would cost, you're probably looking at about 80 million. As a statement signing, that would certainly be one. Perisic is at Spurs. Maybe he sees that. He might see that Croatian connection and think, "Oh, a home from home." But I would say, everything that's been said before has been that he wants to stay in Germany, and RB Leipzig are not the easiest team to negotiate with whatsoever. I think the reports yesterday, I think they came out of France, were just about Spurs had actually made an inquiry. I'm sure, to be honest, I'm sure that inquiry has come before. I'm sure Paratici has spoken to his representatives and people at Leipzig in the past about it, because he is, like I say, top draw, one of the best young defenders in Europe, if not the world. If Spurs start to move for him and manage to get over the line, that would be maybe up there with one of the biggest signings in their recent history. He's that good. But yeah, let's temper that expectations. Let's see how things go with that. I'd imagine it'll be difficult for anyone to get him away this summer, but you never know. Djed Spence. We talk about Djed Spence. What's the latest with him? It's a weird one with Djed Spence. In terms of actual progress to be able to report on, in terms of Tottenham and a beard and everything, there's not. But there is a growing expectation, certainly on the Borough side, that the move is going to happen. He appears to favour Spurs, which is fantastic. This is when I was speaking earlier about values for players. I think Spurs are very much coming into this with the view of, look, that they want Spence. It's no, there's no two ways about it. They are certainly have been interested in him in a while. And I said Paratici has gone to look at it, watch him live as well. I think the key thing for Spurs, I guess, is that he's had a terrific season, fantastic season, helped Nottingham Forest on loan get to the Premier League through the playoffs. But ultimately, he's had this one fantastic season, and it has come in the Championship. He's not a Premier League player. Yes, technically he got a team there, but he is not, has not had that experience yet of being a Premier League player. And I guess the price needs to reflect that. We've seen figures being bandied about of over 20 million or over. For a player has had one very good look, he is a terrific player. I think he could be a really, really terrific signing for Spurs if or when they get this over the line. But you've got to be sensible of value. And I get this is a frustration on Twitter. It's very much, I think there was maybe a report that said Spurs are willing to walk away. I don't get that's the impression right now. It sounds, like I say, there seems to be an expectation that it will go through. And I'm going to read you out some latest quotes from Chris Wilder as well. But yeah, I think it's about getting the right value. And I was going to say, it's people on social media getting very irate about this and Levy getting blamed for it, and why Spurs haven't wrapped this up. They can't even sign a 21-year-old for a Championship. But the key is, just because you've got the money doesn't mean you should have to pay what you believe is over the top prices. And the best example of this, I always think, is Man City. I remember watching the All or Nothing documentary. Who was it? There was a defender they were linked with. I can't remember who it was. It was someone, but the price was ridiculous. Maybe it was Van Dijk. Was it Van Dijk? Or maybe it might have been. Maybe they were talking about that. I'm sure it would have been after the Van Dijk went to Liverpool, because City obviously wanted Van Dijk. But at the end of the day, they just weren't going to pay over the odds. And I think that has to be the attitude. And look, I'm going to tell you the quotes here from Chris Wilder. His quotes are quite interesting. He kind of spoke about what might happen if Djed Spence doesn't leave. But actually, his quotes for me felt more like, he's probably going to go. So these were quotes from he was quoted saying it in the Northern Echo. If nothing happens with Djed, then he's our player and he'll be back for pre-season. From my point of view, negotiations between Kieran Scott, Neil Bassor, Steve Gibson and Tottenham stay between Kieran, Neil, Steve and Tottenham. If the deal doesn't get done, we'll see where we go from there. Have I got input into it? Yeah, 100%. The boy obviously doesn't want to come back here, which I've got absolutely no issue with. He obviously sees a future away from here and he had a brilliant season last season. We're expecting that deal to happen. Listen to those words. We're expecting that deal to happen. But if it doesn't, then he's our player. From a club point of view, the deal has to be right. We're not trying to stand in the way of anyone. I've never done that as a manager, and I've had plenty of situations before where opportunities have come along to players. But there's always three parties involved in any deals. And it's got to be right for all three parties for it to happen. It's got to be right for the player. And obviously from the noises, it sounds as though Spurs is where he wants to go. Tottenham want him, and we're prepared for that, but it's got to be right for us too. It all needs to marry up. So we've got some interesting things in there. So when I say there's been no progress in terms of the actual deal itself or the bid coming out of a value being agreed, what it obviously we're getting there is Wilder admitting it's likely to happen, admitting that the player wants to go from what he's understanding of the situation to Spurs, and obviously that Spurs want him, but we knew that anyway. But what I found was really interesting was some little more quotes he said. So, like I say, this figure we keep hearing is around 20 million. Personally, I think you end. I think if I'm Spurs, I'm looking to offer a certain amount up front, and then performance-related things where if he does become a star, then Middlesbrough will be compensated for that. Because ultimately, at the moment, he hasn't got enough behind him to be that big fee player yet, but he could be. He could be a brilliant player. So yeah, I think that's what we'll see. Whether it's like a 10 to 15 million pound deal that then can become 20 million at some point. That's what I wonder if we'll end up looking at. But yeah, when I say about the 20 million being interesting, Chris Wilder actually he kind of mocked that player in his next set of quotes when talking about that kind of value for a championship player. So he said, we're a reasonable football club, but some of the numbers you sometimes get quoted are ridiculous, and we're not going to allow anyone to take advantage of us. We got quoted 20 to 25 million pounds for a forward playing in the Championship recently, but we didn't think that was a fair number. We're prepared to pay fair numbers, as we always have done, but we're not going to be silly, and we're certainly not going to be giving our players away for a fee we don't think is right. Ultimately, Djed's our player. We're not reliant on getting in money for Djed Spence, although obviously it would help. We're certainly not in a position where we're having to wait to see what happens with Djed before we can get other things done. So he's kind of said that in his own words. We got quoted 20 to 25 million for a forward playing in a Championship, which we didn't think was a fair number. I don't know if Middlesbrough heard that. We're like, "Whoa, stop it. Because you're essentially saying that 20 to 25 million pounds is too much for a Championship player. And especially when you think that strikers actually often go for more money than other positions because obviously they bring the goals. So I thought that was quite interesting. So let's see what happens with Djed Spence. Like I say, I think that's one at this point that will end up going through eventually. But it seems to be it's going to be a bit of a waiting game, I guess. It's who blinks first, isn't it, I suppose? Because there will be a point, I think, that Spurs will get to where they'll be thinking, okay, we want to get him in for pre-season now. Because, let's see, he played internationals, so he'll be one of the bunch that comes back just before the career tour, if he was a Spurs player by then. So what's that, July the 9th. So you got about another 2 weeks, but it would have to move quite quickly, that one. I mean, I guess, yes, you could fly him out separately if need be, but still... so keep an eye on that and see who blinks first. Look, I know there was stuff about Spurs potentially walking away. Yes, of course. I mean, that's something you can always report because at the end of the day, if Borough have a valuation that Spurs find unrealistic, like I was saying with City and Van Dijk, I'm not comparing them, but as in the players. But eventually at some point, yes, you will walk away if you just feel it's not the right price, and especially if you find someone that is what you see as a better value deal. But I think in terms of homegrown purposes, I think my gut says that happens. Look, this is not one for I know sometimes there's these websites that write stuff about what I say, which I still find incredible to this day. But this is not. Alistair Gold says Spurs will sign Djed Spence. It's just me saying my gut feeling is, with everything that we're hearing, and especially these quotes as well, it seems to be there's an expectation it will get done eventually. Like I say, it's just about who blinks first. So yeah, in terms of outgoings as well, we spoke about Harry Winks earlier, or we mentioned him. Obviously, it's interesting the whole Richarlison thing and how that works. At the moment, we're told that it hasn't been a part of that, and Richarlison stuff has just been is interest at this moment, but hasn't been stepped up. I'm sure his name will have come up in discussions at some point, but it's mostly been about Winks. Like I say, the financial fair play thing at Everton is a bit of an issue in terms of it looks like they would prefer to do a loan, whereas Spurs would prefer to sell. Sounds like Winks will be happy to go. I think it'd be a good move for him. I do. I'm not a subscriber to the Winks is rubbish thing. I just think he's a player who was going to be one of the most talented young kind of midfielders around. Poch adored him. Poch thought, he called him his little Iniesta. And I saw someone saying the other day he only played 45 minutes well against Real Madrid. No, he didn't. He played well in both games against Real Madrid. I remember him playing really well against Dortmund. Played really well. I remember the Liverpool 4-1 game. He actually played well against Liverpool this season as well. There's been loads of games I remember playing really well in as well. And let's not forget, we look back at it and maybe a bit of scorn, but he and Sissoko essentially carried Spurs midfield through much of that season they got to the Champions League final, because obviously Dembele had a lot of injury issues and then eventually left in January for the Chinese league to be kinder on his body. And those two formed a partnership that, really took Spurs through. And I just think there's maybe a bit of revising of history, because fans have seen a player who hasn't been playing much in recent years, hasn't been starting much. And any player that does that loses their rhythm. But I actually think Everton would be a good move for him. But, like I say, how that works exactly, whether it ends up being a loan to buy, perhaps. There's the other interesting scenario of, Everton potentially could be bought out. I think I was told that there's 2 bids have gone in for Everton. And, whether those new owners want Winks is another thing. Whether that's someone that would be a priority signing for them. So I wonder whether Spurs are going to have to move fast on that one or not, just to make sure they get him in. Because Everton certainly, and Moshiri and Lampard has certainly wanted Winks as well. And that may be the be-all and end-all whether Lampard wants him. But like I said before, they went for him twice in January, or a couple of times, and both before and after Lampard's arrival. So, yeah, I think Spurs will look to get that done, and I wonder whether loan to buy becomes it. But then, like I say again, the whole June 30th thing is interesting. Does it become before that, or does it come after that because of how it reflects on which financial year for Everton? I wonder whether it comes just after that or not. Yeah, interesting one that it is. There's a Dele Alli angle as well. Obviously, he went there in that deal that was like a free transfer, but with loads of add-ons, which will get triggered after certain things. I was told 20 starts. There's some people that suggest it might be 20 appearances, but I was told starts, which is a whole different ballgame. Yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of talk that Spurs like other players at Everton as well. Personally, I really like Anthony Gordon. I think he's going to be a terrific young winger. Guesty, who I do the podcast with, Rob Guesty, he knows that he's probably my favourite player at Everton. He's playing with that, a bit like Dele used to, that kind of freedom of youth, and he's so good. But Guesty keeps warning me off him. It's like, don't you dare. No way Spurs get him. And if I'm Everton, I wouldn't sell him either, quite frankly. I think he goes on to become a star. But yeah, who else? They look at Godfrey, maybe. Yeah, be an intriguing one. I remember there were a couple of reports a month ago. It might have been Matt Law in the Telegraph. I think maybe had written that Spurs were looking at 3 Everton players. I think it was Richarlison. Might have been Gordon and Godfrey. I can't remember. But yeah, it's certainly a club where there's a couple that they keeping their eyes on. Who else in terms of outgoing? Joe Rodon, of course. Joe Rodon. I think there's a few clubs interested in him. I saw some talk of Roma being interesting. I'm told from people around him that hasn't really come to anything at this point. But I wouldn't be surprised if it does at any point, because Jose liked him. He did. He was playing him quite regularly towards the end. I think he started his last four matches. And I was told that on the day Jose left Spurs, he kind of essentially took Hugo Lloris to one side, the skipper, and told him to look after Joe Rodon, because he was going to be potentially the best defender at the club and a really special player. And I know other players overheard that being said as well. So, there's a little bit of affection there between the two. And nothing Joe Rodon. My thoughts on Joe Rodon. I think he will smash it if he gets regular football somewhere. I think Italy seems to be the fashionable place. It was Germany, wasn't it? And now Italy seems to be a little bit of that as well. So if that did happen, but like I said, I'm told at the moment by people around him, there's been no real kind of Roma official interest shown. So whether that gets stepped up or not. But again, I've said it before, if I'm Spurs, I sort a loan out rather than a purchase, because I think he will be a very good player. And I think if they loan him, they probably would look to up his contract, which I think has got 3 years on it. I think it's maybe 2 with an option. I can't remember. But I think that's what you do. It's a clever way that clubs work, and Spurs are no different. When they go to loan out a player, what they'll often do is, if it's a player they'd like to knock a couple of years onto the contract of, they'll offer them a new contract, but kind of discuss with whether it's them or the agent, discuss with the club that wants to loan them how much they'd be willing to pay, and then they knock up the contract to that price. So essentially, the loan club pay the contract for that season, of course, and then obviously Spurs then any club look to the parent club, look to what they do with that player next. And in terms of their stuff, and because obviously they're protecting themselves with a longer contract, makes the player's value go up, especially if they do well, or it retains its value, and but they don't have to pay any. It's all very clever the way these things are all worked out. It's sometimes we see this, we could, and even myself, before I kind of understood that was the way it worked, you'd look at it and you think, oh, new contract, oh, excellent, that's really good, and you actually think it's actually, there's a little bit more cynical side to it, that it's all parties are kind of benefiting from it, I guess. Player gets more money, parent club retains the value in the player, and those wages are getting paid for anywhere by a loan club, and then the loan club get the player that they wanted, a very good player. So, yeah. Tongi and Dembele, there was talk yesterday about that Spurs had accepted a loan with an option to buy a bid from Galatasaray. From what I've kind of been asking around about that, it seems to be knocked down from people on the Tottenham side of things. Certain suggestions that no, nothing has been accepted for him in that regard. It would be a strange move. It would be a bit of a climb down for him. He's certainly a player, Tongi, that we know has been no secret. He's wanted to leave pretty much in every summer transfer window there has been since he joined at Spurs. I think for a player who kind of believed that he should be playing at the top level for the likes of Real Madrid, and Barcelona, these types, I think to then go to Galatasaray, with no disrespect, because a lot of very good players go to the Turkish league, but I feel for Tongi, having set himself the target of playing in these top leagues, it would seem a little bit of a climb down. So yeah, that was an interesting one. Ajax and Bergwijn, obviously Ajax got to meet Spurs' price for him. Again, a bit like the Djed Spence situation, I suppose. But then Spurs can say Premier League player, and a player who fired Netherlands to the World Cup. It's a different situation, really. And that's why, I guess, when you're looking at comparative values, Spurs looking for something more akin to the 27 million or so for Bergwijn that they paid PSV for. And then if you're going to then say 20 million for Spence, player who hasn't obviously played Premier League football, European football, or anything like that yet, and hasn't proven himself on the big stage, you kind of see where it's coming from. So, yeah, I get the frustration. I'm very much, especially as a reporter, I'd love to see these deals done. I can report on them, get cracking, get out to Korea in a couple of weeks' time and interview Djed Spence. Of course, that's what I want to do. But I also understand the point that can't just chuck away money at something just because you have it. So yeah, that's Djed Spence, that's Tongi, that's Bergwijn. I said earlier, Gareth Bale's gone off to LAFC to play MLS football, which is a really interesting move. It's like a Hollywood ending to his story. I think the deal is till next June with... but I think there may even be an option for another year if he decides to. It's an interesting one because obviously the contracts are due June to June, when the American season is more February to November, potentially December. It's a bit different this year because of the World Cup. So yeah, the contract kind of is around like outside seasons. It's a really interesting one. But yeah, I think a lot of people around Bale thought that he would end up going to Cardiff, played for his hometown club for just at least one season. But yeah, I find that it's fascinating. That's what's ended up happening. Brilliant for the MLS. Sorry, the MLS. I keep saying the MLS. It's got to talk about the NFL. It's not the MLS. It's Major League Soccer, so it can't be the Major League Soccer. I think for MLS, it's a really good signing, and I do watch quite a few of their games. It seems to be on Sky, kind of later hours, and then they re-show them. So yeah, it'd be terrific. I've actually been to the LA Derby, which would be his first game. I think it's July the 9th. El Trafico, it's called, LAFC against LA Galaxy. It's a beautiful stadium that LAFC have got. It's got essentially looks over the LA skyline, all the skyscrapers. It's very cool. I think it was only built about 4 years ago, or opened 4 years ago. So yeah, I think it's a good move for Bale. The level of football in MLS is improving. Of course, it is all the time. It's a far more competitive league than it used to be, and he's actually going Chile. He's going there as well, a free transfer. So I think in terms of getting him tuned up and ready, I think they're top of their conference and the entire combined league table as well at the moment, LAFC. Yeah, I think it's a good move for him. It's a good move for the league, and it's a good move just probably in general, to be honest. So that's him. Christian Eriksen, I think we'll get the decision on him pretty soon. Like I've said before, Spurs kind of cooled their interest. Hadn't contacted his agent in a few weeks. His people. I wonder where he'll go. It'll be interesting. I just wonder whether it'll be Brentford. I just kind of got a feeling that it will be Brentford. Obviously, it was Man U and Brentford. God, what did I say? There was loads of clubs last time I did an update on him. I think, did I say West Ham as well, Leicester, Newcastle, Ajax, an unnamed La Liga side as well. We shall find out. Maybe like Bale, maybe there'll be a little bit of a twist. But I would wonder whether the loyal, in a way, decision would be Brentford. And yeah, it's working for him, and he'd be able to keep his kids in school, I guess, in London and everything, and wouldn't need to move and things like that. It kind of makes the most sense geographically, I guess, for him. But I genuinely don't know where he's going to end up. Does not appear to be. It's going to be Tottenham. Who else? Dane Scarlett, Alfie Devine, still doing good things for England under-19s at the European under-19 Championships. Dane was rested last night. I think they played Israel. I watched a fair chunk of that. Alfie Devine, early assist, which was very very nice, involved in that first. I think it was the only goal in the end. Did they score one later on? I can't remember. I don't think I watched the fight at the end of it. But yeah, they're doing good things, and they're through to, I think it's the quarterfinals now, so keep an eye on that. Great experience for him. And then we have the pre-season. Pre-season will begin for Skippy, Japhet Tanganga and Matt Doherty tomorrow. They're coming in a bit early because of their injuries that they've had playing catch-up. Skippy and Oliver Skipp and Japhet Tanganga are both fully fit and ready to get cracking. I think Matt Doherty is going to be slightly behind, a bit more recovery work to do, I think, on him. I think it was meant to be July, so not long. I don't think he'll be very long at all. I think Perisic was the same. I think when Peritic's knee injury that he had, I think he was meant to be within the first couple of days of pre-season, if not ready for the first day. His Instagram story is constantly him working very hard in the gym, so I'd imagine he will be ready. So those 3 players back tomorrow. I don't know whether the club will put out photos or not. I know certainly Skippy has been doing training already, working to a programme before he was coming back to Hotspur Way, but I think the 3 of them officially will start coming into Hotspur Way to doing bits and pieces, talk to the physios, see how they've recovered since both Skip and Tanganga obviously had surgery. Skip was April, Tanganga was March. Skip pelvic injury, of course. Tanganga knee, Doherty knee. Doherty was medial collateral ligaments, which I think Conte said 7 or 8 weeks, I think, after it happened. But technically for one of those, it can be up to 12 weeks. And I think the initial prognosis was by early April. So hopefully he'll be ready. It may well be that he's been working incredibly hard, and when we see him come back and he's ready to go. But they've got another week, though, anyway, before the rest join. The non-internationals rock up next Monday, not tomorrow. And then, as I said before, the international players will be back just in time for the flight to Korea on July the 9th. You know, certain players may decide they want to come back a little bit early. They may well decide that there's little things they want to work on. They want a bit of extra fitness work. They may want to impress the manager. You know, some of these players that potentially could be heading out on loan. Maybe they want to give him one last little look at him before he decides. That little bit of extra time with him always gets, a few brownie points. A few people have had weddings recently. I know Ryan Mason got married. Ben Davies got married as well. So, not to say that really means anything, but just means that you'd think they'd have a little honeymoon although a lot of them will have already been on their holidays. It'd be quite interesting to see which way around they do that. Whether they had the honeymoon first in a way. But yeah, so I've had a lot of people asking me when players back. So those 3 players back tomorrow. I don't know whether it may be that academy players come back. They normally come a week early as well, so perhaps you'll start seeing them involved. Next Monday will be all the rest of the non-international players. And then just before the July the 9th flight, so it may be July the 8th, the international players come back. They've squeezed in their 3 weeks off before they got to head off. So yeah, that's that. I think that's everything possible I could probably speak about. What I would say is, if you want to ask any questions for a future Q&A, get them in the comments under this one. Especially if you left a Q&A and a question in a previous Q&A that I didn't get round to, please re-ask it in the comments. I keep meaning to go back to one. There was a few questions in it, but we're about 5-6 videos back, and very thankfully, these get a lot of comments, these videos, and just sifting through to try and work out which ones I haven't answered is going to be a bit of a nightmare at this stage. So please, if it wasn't answered, please get it underneath this video, and I shall do my best in either the next video or the one after to try and answer your questions. So there you go. That's it, really. I think we've talked about all things Tottenham Hotspur that I could possibly think of at this moment. I feel like we'll start to see some movement this week on various things because, like I say, I think players have to be in for that pre-season period, and I think this is where it's going to heat up a little bit in some situations. So keep an eye on it. I will react, of course, and any news I get, I will try and get extra videos out when I can. I'm not around Tuesday. I was going to maybe do on Tuesday, but I'm actually going to Wimbledon because Jonathan Veal, my fellow Spurs reporting colleague from the Press Association, he's covering Wimbledon. He's managed to get me a ticket to, I think they get media tickets to go out and watch some Wimbledon, which would be a great experience. I do like a bit of tennis as well. So, so it's not probably going to be Tuesday, but maybe we'll see possibly one on Wednesday, later on Wednesday. But there you go. Right, going to head off now. As always, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.